Barbecue. Hello and welcome to Boost Booze and Barbecue. This is Andy, and joining me today, I have Chad Alexander from Local Bar Media. Chad, how is it going?
It's good, Andy. Good. Thanks for having me on the show, man. I'm excited to be able to sit down and chat with you again.
I'm really looking forward to it. The Local Bar, you can find that anywhere you find your quality podcasts, as well as on Facebook. You've got a website out there. All of that's going to be linked underneath of this episode. Chad, I really appreciate you coming on, man. Did your show here a while back and had a lot of fun talking to you. It was a good time. I always like listening to your show. You always seem to have a good and uplifting message, and I really appreciate that about you.
Oh, well, I appreciate it, man. Yeah, I find it being negative all the time seems to bore a lot of people. So I try not to do that. So, but yeah. But yeah, man, I enjoyed having you on. I really like your style, and having people like you on to talk about what you do and the passion you have for it is really why I got into doing the show in the first place. So yeah, man, turnabout's fair play on that. I appreciate what you do as well.
Well, thank you. And hopefully, more people appreciate what we're doing here, and we can send you some more love.
Yeah, that's right, man. That's right. Absolutely.
How is everything going over there?
Pretty good. You know, it's the crazy time of year where everyone, I live in the southeastern United States. So you're talking 90% Christian community over here. So everybody's full on Christmas. We breeze right over Hanukkah. You see a couple of neighbors with menorahs in the windows, but other than that, we're full on Christmas, which means all the stores are jam-packed, the prices are jacked up, and no one has any clue how to drive. As long as you don't let that affect you right now, I'd say life over here is going pretty well.
Nice. That's always good to hear. Christmas has not gotten in full swing in my house yet, unfortunately, but got the tree yesterday. That's going to go up. It's going to get all the decorations. We're going to try to cram everything into these last, 4 days here before Christmas. And actually, I gave it away. We're recording a little early since next week is Christmas, but this is the 3BQ Christmas episode.
Oh, wow. Well, ho, ho, ho to me then. That's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know what? It's going to be a great season. I'm looking forward to the end of the year. I'm looking forward to 2019. Big and good things are going to happen. I'm sure you guys have a ton of stuff on the calendar. You always do.
Yeah, it's just kind of nuts around here. If you listen to, we have a couple of podcasts with Local Bar Media. One of them has taken a break simply because of the madness that happens. Local Bar is a show that I do where I interview folks like you and other really cool people that have great positive stories to share. The other one is called Welding a Family, and that is on me and my wife and how we blended our families a year or two ago, and we started a show that. It kind of documents it and it kind of doesn't. It has taken a break because the holidays have gotten out of hand. When you're a divorced parent and you've got a kid, you have to share it with the other family. The schedules get pretty conflicted. When you've got two kids that have to go two separate directions, and they're both in elementary school now, which means twice as many Christmas pageants, twice as many school plays. Twice as many church sing-alongs. I mean, and trying to figure all that out, it's kind of nuts. Not to mention, work and everything else you want to do with your life. So it's one of those things that for the people that are out there that have a hard time finding the joy in Christmas, I can feel their pain. The answer is a little bit easier than they realize to get through that, but I certainly understand the rush and the madness during this time of year.
It's so true, brother. It's so true.
Yeah.
I forget sometimes that you are blending your two families, and I like that, and I appreciate that. And speaking of you're a bit of a musician, are you not?
Well, you could call me that. The guys in the band disagree with that every now and then, but yes, you can call me that. I've been I play in a couple of bands. I play in I live in a really cool place. There's an episode of the Local Bar that I did. If the listeners really care about this aspect of what I do, there's an episode that I did a few months back with a guy whose name is Mark Rapp. Now, for listeners out in your neck of the woods, you may not know who he is, But he's a really cool cat in town. And if you're just around town, you may see this brilliant, amazing jazz trumpet player show up in some of the clubs around town. He's actually last year, he was given the title by the House of Representatives of the South Carolina Ambassador for Jazz Music. And
wow.
that's a high honor in this state because only two other people have ever had that. A guy named Skip Pearson, who sadly passed away last year. And the other guy before him was a dude named Dizzy Gillespie. A lot of people don't know he's from South Carolina. And Mark and I talk about, we had this crazy music scene in the South Carolina area. Mark's played all over the world. He's done stuff from playing with major New Orleans jazz musicians. He's gone on tour with Hootie and the Blowfish back in the day when they were really big. He just got back from doing a jazz thing in New York. And so I bring all that up, number one, to promote the show a little bit, but number two, South Carolina does have a very strange art scene. You don't think of that when you hear South Carolina. Folks that have visited places like Charleston, it may not surprise them as much, but we do. And we have this really cool community, especially where I live, of musicians. And so we all play in each other's bands. And so I play in a couple of bands around town. But the band that I play with that tours and hits, different areas in the southeastern United States is one called Don Merkel and the Blacksmiths. And we've been around for a few years now. I play piano with them, and we have a blast, and it's a lot of fun. We just got back from a gig up in the beautiful town of Asheville that's got, you want to talk about great drinks and great food. That place up there has got some restaurants that are fun to get into, and it's a cool thing about being in a band, man. I get to try some of that stuff. Usually hungover, but a lot of times pre-show, so I actually can actually give some good report on some of them, but other ones I would take with a grain of salt.
All right, so let me ask you this: how often do the venues where you're playing comp you your drinks, and how often do they charge you for them?
So it depends. Most of the ones, all right, how about, let me put it this way. If you're in a city that has a ton of bands that come through, they generally are pretty good with that. If it's festival related, if we're ever playing at some festival and the venue is inside the gates of the festival or they're sponsoring the festival, they're pretty good at doing that. But we're also a really big band. And we're all built like linebackers. We're not small dudes. Like, we look like a big old group of blacksmiths. So there's 7 of us, and we've had some places be like, all right, you got a $100 bar tab, and then after that, we'll give you a discount on drinks. And we breeze through that bar tab our first hour of playing, so it really depends. I will say that our favorite places to play also tend to cover our drinks. I don't know how that just tends to happen, but it does. It's a mystery. It's amazing.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Fortunate. That's what you are. Fortunate.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So what instruments do you play?
So in that band, I primarily just play the piano. I don't do anything else. I sing a good bit, and then I play the piano. I've been playing piano since I was extremely young, like first grade. I took lessons all through high school, but I played in piano bars when I hit the high school, college age, and I really liked that. I played percussion though for a good bit, so I've done some drumming in the past. It's probably done more to just help me develop my style of piano playing, which I hear from people is a lot more percussive than other styles. Don't think less Billy Joel, more Tori Amos kind of style, I guess. Which is funny when you hear our music, you wouldn't think that sound would go through. It works somehow. I do play guitar in another band though. I play a guitar and sing. I have never taken a guitar lesson. If you were to see me playing guitar, do not look too closely. It's actually a magic trick. I have no idea what I'm doing, but it's been something that I've kind of gotten into a little bit more over the past couple of years.
That's super funny. I always find it interesting when I'm talking to an intelligent musician, they always play more than one. Always. Every time I'm talking to somebody like that, like an engineer at my work, he plays the drums and he also plays bass guitar and he also plays trumpet or something like that. And I mean, it's always that way. It's always like, sure, you play the one thing that you're comfortable with, but then what else do you play? You know what I mean?
It's funny. I had a neat conversation with a guy. Guy's name is Garland Sims. He's a musician in town. He's a really cool cat, and he had this. He's been making an album, and he runs into that too. That a lot of the musicians that he knows just happen to play instruments. And so he wanted to learn how to play a bunch of different instruments. He wanted to kind of be the Phil Collins of an album. He wanted to sit down and play every instrument. What he found, though, is that, yeah, those guys all play different instruments. And it's kind of like what I said. We may, and I love the fact that you called me an intelligent musician. I'm going to highlight that part and send it to the rest of the guys in the band that you called me that. But one of the things that I think you'll see out of those guys that do that is they may play multiple instruments. It may be to get a sound or a feel, especially if they're writing music, or it may help kind of give them a different perspective in how they play their main instrument. But everybody's got a main instrument, and that is your thing. And what my friend, the reason he brought that up is that he quit trying to do that because he realized on the albums, I need to have the guys that are good at playing bass. The guy that's good at playing drums. The girl that's good at playing guitar, play guitar. And it's great that we can all play different things and we can let that kind of guide us in some different directions. But let's remember that we do need to have focus somewhere. So I do. You're not the first person I've heard say something like that. And I think there's some truth to it. But for people that really want to do something big, make sure you keep your focus, because I think a lot of times what happens with musicians, we're all guilty of not being able to say no. Like someone's like, hey, we're having a jam tonight over at the house. Okay, I'm on the way. Hey, I need somebody to come play this week. Okay, I'll do it. We'll do that with ourselves too in instruments. And while it may, it may take your musical palette and expand it, and that's great. You don't want to lose the time you should dedicate towards your actual instrument, though, if that makes sense.
Right. No, that totally makes sense. It totally makes sense. I mean, that's the sign of it's knowing not where your limitations are, but knowing where to outsource, right?
Yeah, sure. And I don't want to come across as saying that people, I feel like a jerk for saying it kind of. I don't want to ever, look, if you want to try something, go try it. I mean, just do it. And if people say you suck, remember you sucked when you first began anything. Go back and listen to episode number 1 of The Local Bar. And keep in mind, this is not the first podcast I've ever done. It was terrible. You got to start somewhere. So do that. But if you're really good at something and you have a passion for it, like don't lose that focus while you're doing other things. Remember, it's all to build around that thing that you love doing, and you don't want to lose your love for that. That's where I see people get lost and they start kind of losing their love for why they started it in the first place. So I think it's something you got to be careful with.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's a very good point. This is what I'm talking about, folks. I mean, this guy, he is laying down the food for thought and the knowledge for life, people. You really need to be tuning in to The Local Bar.
Yeah, you're just lucky I'm not drunk right now because it's only 11 o'clock in the morning, but that's okay. I got you, man.
Hey, that's the perfect segue, by the way, because this is a booze-only edition of Boost, Booze, and Barbecue, because obviously you titled your show Local Bar, and it's because you know a thing or two about your drink. So let's get into that. We talked a little bit off air. You're a whiskey guy, you're a scotch guy, you're a wine guy, and you won't turn away a beer if it's handed to you, right?
Rarely will I turn away anything if it's handed to me. If I've got to buy it, I'm going to be a little bit more critical. But I don't turn much away there, my brother.
Let's drill this down a little bit. I'm going to start with wines.
Okay.
Red or white, or does it matter?
More red. It's always going to be a little bit more red for me. I like both. Don't get me wrong, but it is always, I'm going to tend to lean towards a red.
And do you have a red that you like more than others?
My go-to is always a cab. I don't know that God ever created a wine that's just an easier to find that everyone at the table is going to like more than a cab. And I've always liked it. I do like a lot of the more earthy wines, though. I'm a big like Argentinian wines. I really like that. I love Malbecs. I love Tempranillos. So I'm fine going a little bit darker. I drink my coffee black. I like that full kind of earthy flavor. But if I'm sitting around and we've got people coming over, a couple bottles of cab, makes everybody happy. Nobody ever really complains about that.
It's very true. And it's funny you bring up Malbec because just last night we were opening a bottle of wine and my wife brought out this bottle of Malbec and I said, "Oh, honey, hang on to that one because I want to make wassail with that on Christmas Day."
Look at there. That's the old timey traditions coming out. I love it. That's fantastic.
Yeah, man. And very careful not to heat the wine too much. I don't want to be cooking off too much of that alcohol. Like, listen, if we're going to be making wassail out of a good bottle of wine, you need to get your money's worth. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So do you sing the old Christmas carol, "Here We Come a Wassailing," while you make it?
I sing it after I've drank it because I feel like that's the way it needs to be sung, with a little bit of a slur.
That's right.
Here we go. Wassailing.
That is the proper way. That's it, young man. You've got it.
Yes, we're on the same page. It's funny that you said that your go-to is Cabernet though, because I actually 100% agree. Because if you're going to do a red wine that everyone is going to enjoy, that is definitely the way to go. In Oregon, this is Pinot country, right? I'm actually trying to get a show together just to highlight the rise of Pinot in Oregon. There's something about our elevations, our climate, the soil. It just makes it perfect for Pinot. We recently talked with a fella that's got a winery, and actually he was one of the original winemakers in the Willamette Valley. He got started in 1978, I think, and he was giving us a rundown of kind of the wine industry through that time, and the rise and the fall of different winemakers that were coming in. He started when there was only 12 winemakers in the Willamette Valley. Now we're up over 700.
Holy crap. Wow.
Yeah, it's really wild. But he was telling us these stories about how Pinot became a thing because people were planting Pinot trying to make champagne. Because the Oregon Willamette Valley is very similar to Champagne, France, right? And so everyone thought that the next best sparkling wine was going to be coming out of Oregon, and they didn't really pay attention too much to any of the other wines. But then once the Pinot Noir really started coming into its own, and guys were just making strictly the Pinot Noir, then they were realizing, oh my gosh, this is something really good. And then one of the original winemakers ended up, I'm giving too much away probably, but let me just say an Oregon Pinot in 1990 won the overall grand championship for Pinot Noir in France. And that's what jump-started the Pinot Noir industry here.
Wow, that's amazing. I had no idea. I mean, it's so funny when it comes to wine. There's so many misconceptions about it. We get this idea in our head that good wine can only come from one place or another. And don't get me wrong, I understand that some vineyards know how to do it better than others. But when you start looking at what the earth is going to give you, the earth doesn't care about your branding. It really doesn't. And it's amazing to me how the ground will set it. There's a couple of other things. It's not just wine. You'll see it in like you're a barbecue guy too. So I'll segue just for a second into this. You're into hot peppers and hot sauce, I take it?
Oh, yes.
Okay. So the Carolina Reaper is a very funny pepper to me. Like it is an extremely hot pepper, but an incredibly flavorful one, which is important for me. I don't like gimmick hot. I like real hot. I like real heat. I mean, man heat.
Right.
But I want flavor with it too. I don't want just the texture. And the Carolina Reaper pepper is a phenomenal one. And what's crazy is it's only grown in a very certain part of South Carolina and North Carolina. Like I'm sure people grow them all over. Don't get me wrong. And they grow that pepper. But the best ones come and it's because of the soil. It's because of it's where we used to really grow tobacco real well. For some reason, grows great peppers. And it's amazing how when you start looking at the science of what's there, what the earth is giving you, I guess the best way to say it surprises me, but doesn't shock me that an area like Oregon could produce something like that simply because. Yeah, it surprises me because I haven't heard that. It doesn't shock me because the science probably makes sense, and it's great to see that. So that's awesome. I am out of the whites. I'm a I do like my Pinot Grigios, but I do like Pinot Noirs as well when it comes to reds.
I'm with you. The Pinot Noirs, though, it seems like it's a little more difficult for me to really hone in and get a Pinot Noir that everyone is going to love, unless it's a Pinot that I've had before, I've drank before, I know where it comes from. You know what I mean? Like, it's hard for me to go into a store and grab a Pinot Noir off the shelf that I've never had before and have everyone love it. However, you start doing the big jammy reds like a Cabernet or, not necessarily a Merlot, but like you said, a Tempranillo or something like that. Those tend to be just a universal hit because it's hard to make a bad wine out of those.
Yeah. I've it's funny you bring that up. I've struggled over the past few years with Merlot. I don't know what changed in my taste, but I kind of stay away from Merlot nowadays for some reason. But I do find that I agree with you. People really like those, and it's something to really get into as well. So,
well, the Merlot, in my opinion, it picks up a lot of the barrel flavor, and it's really easy. I shouldn't say that because I'm not a wine expert. I'm not in the trenches with the people making it. It just seems to me like sometimes Merlots taste like they've picked up too much of that oak flavor.
Sure. I'd agree with that. I completely agree with that. I think, don't get me wrong. Again, like I said, I like the earthy flavors. I like that kind of stuff, but when you can't have too much of a good thing. You really can. And I think that's kind of what happens a good bit.
It's the difference between a criminy mushroom and moss. They're both earthy, but they taste different.
Right. You're exactly right. That's exactly it.
That's what I think of always whenever I'm having these red wines that I just feel like sat on oak a little bit too long. And it makes me wonder if the Merlots that I try, I rarely get a Merlot like that from a small local winery to me. It's typically the bigger brand names, right? And so I wonder if they're doing a little bit of like stave aging instead of barrel aging, and they've left the staves in too long or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's probably it. I mean, like you said, I'm not in the trenches watching what these folks do, but with the way that the flavor of those goes, it wouldn't surprise me at all.
Right. Do you do whites at all?
I do. And I do a good bit of champagne as well. I had a guy years ago. Do you have time for me to tell you kind of a cool story?
Mm-hmm.
All right. I had this guy years ago is a medical equipment manager. Guy did very well for himself. Lived in Highland Park in Dallas. Jerry Jones is one of his neighbors, the owner for the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, this guy's done well for himself, but he's a very down to earth guy. We were at his house. Now his house, by the way, was nowhere near the size of Uncle Jerry's over there, but it was a really cool place. And we were in his living room having dinner. I was there for a sales trip, and a few of us were over at his house, like 5 of us. And he found out that I was a Methodist preacher's kid, and so was he. So we got into the stories about being a preacher's kid and what that's like, and blah blah blah. And he just kind of started. We just kind of started we like the cut of each other's jib. We were like getting along. And he was a wine collector, but he's a guy that got into wine later in life. And so he's like, "Come on down, let me show you my cellar." So we went down, and he's explaining to me. We were asking him the simple questions that if you've never really gotten into it before, would you drink all of these? Is it because they're older? Are they better? And he's like, no, that's not it. He's like, I buy these because they're collector's issues. This one you would never drink because it tastes like crap. But let me tell you the story behind this one. And, and he kind of he took us on a 101 course of a bunch of kids in their 20s about, and I mean their young 20s, about what wine is. And it was really neat. But he and I were sitting there. I looked at him. I was like, Larry, what's your favorite? He's like, let's do something. So he lined up 5 bottles of wine, and he poured a little bit in each one, and he taught me about what to look for. Just, again, crash course only. And he's like, but just tell me which one's your favorite. Go 1 through 5, your favorite to your least favorite. My favorite was a bottle of Alexander Valley Silver Oak Cab. I absolutely love that. I'm looking at a bottle of that right now. Well, it's an empty bottle, but I'm looking at it here in my house. But still to this day, one of my favorites. $90 bottle of wine, great bottle of wine, love it start to finish, love it. And then my second favorite was like this $30 bottle of wine. What was interesting was my fourth favorite, which I really didn't like at all. The only reason I didn't like it is I really couldn't stand the last one, which is fun because the last one was like this $7 bottle of wine that his wife really likes. But I think it was like Jewish wine or something. I don't even think it counts as wine. It was terrible. But the fourth I didn't really like. It was a $300 bottle of wine. And I look at him like, oh, I did that wrong. He's like, no, you didn't. This is just what you like. He's like, my favorite actually that I'm drinking right now is a $25 bottle of wine. He's like, it just depends. What you like is what you like. So I started expanding a little bit more. I'd never really been a white wine drinker. And every now and then I'll be reminded, something will come up that will remind me of that day. And I'll think, I know I've tried it before, but did I try a really bad brand? Or when it comes to Chardonnay, the difference between an oaked and an unoaked Chardonnay. Oh my God. I just found out I thought I hated Chardonnay. I don't. I just hate unoaked Chardonnay. And I didn't realize what those differences are. So when I get a chance, I will delve into other things. Right now, like I said, Pinot Grigio is a white that I tend to drink a good bit. And there's another one that I'm looking at the bar right now, but I don't see anything over there. Something my wife keeps getting every now and then that she really likes. I am a surprisingly enough, even though I like the really earthy stuff, I am a Riesling fan though. Mm-hmm. I like the more fruity Rieslings as well. The Rhine kind of wines, the not the really dry ones. I'm really into Rieslings a good bit, and I'll find myself every now and then jumping into that. But champagne as well, any kind of prosecco, any of that. I don't mind. Just because I like this kind of cab doesn't mean that I'm going to turn that stuff away.
Oh, sure. Well, it makes perfect sense actually, because the base of champagne is a mixture of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah. So it makes total sense. The wines do pair very well. If you've had champagne and you like champagne, then an unoaked Chardonnay is going to remind you of those flavors just like a Pinot Gris would.
Ah, okay. I had no idea. I didn't know that. Wow, that's cool.
Little tidbit for you there.
There you go. Learn something else. How about that? That's pretty good.
Yeah. And beyond wine, you're also a whiskey man. Mm-hmm. Are you more into the Scotch or more into the whiskey? I used to be more into whiskey. I am more into Scotch these days. This is the area where I become a very big creature of habit. This time of year down here where it gets a little colder, cold for us is in the 50s. People start pulling out, you see a lot more Guinness as far as beers are concerned at parties. And you see a lot more Scotch when we all go to these things, I guess, just to keep us warm, or people pull out the nicer stuff. I will try any Scotch. I'll try any Scotch twice. I am hard pressed to find one that I absolutely do not like. But I am, my knee jerk reaction go to, hey, I'm in the store. I think I'll try something different. Oh no, I know what I'm going home with anyway. Is Macallan. I have been a big fan of Macallans. I know they kind of took a dip in taste a couple years back, but I feel like they've kind of come back around. And I love their flavor. I love the way that I love the smoothness of that Scotch. It is one that absolutely speaks to my taste buds perfectly. I'm with you. So now that we've established your love for Scotch, not to ambush you, but I want to know what your opinion is of this. So there was an article that came out yesterday from the BBC, and the title is "Third of Rare Scotch Whiskies Tested Found to be Fake." Yeah. Have you heard of this?
Yeah, I've heard that. So that doesn't surprise me because I think with anything we have that's in front of us since the days of mass production, we've gotten more fakes than we realized. I mean, when you're talking about even with components inside of computers, there have been times that people have used lesser components to push stuff out. The smaller companies have. And the bigger companies like Apple and crap, they don't have to do that. They may have at one time. I don't know. We've seen this in cars. Why in the world do we not think that it can't be done in other places? I'd like to think that's getting fewer and further between simply because of the amount of competition that exists out there. And then, overbearing government regulations and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. It doesn't surprise me, but it also makes me wonder, what exactly do they mean by fake? Because one of the things that you hear, like if you were serving kosher ham, to the Jewish temple, and it's not really kosher, like that's a big thing. But what exactly makes it kosher? You actually look at that. So when they say it's fake, what do they mean by it's fake? I mean, they're not pouring iced tea in these bottles. Like, what are they saying is fake about it? That it's not from the actual place where they said they made it, and it's just rebranded.
I think what they're trying to highlight is that it's not as old as what the bottle says it is, and so it brings the authenticity into question.
Okay, so this is where I'm going to go back to my story that I told about the wine thing. Like I get that. And we all know you can taste the difference with Macallan. All right. Something that I drink all the time. If I drink a 12-year Macallan, I know the damn difference between a 12-year and an 18-year Macallan.
Oh yeah.
And you can try to fool me. You will not fool me, because that's the one I drink constantly. It's the same thing. Like you go and do the Coke and Pepsi challenge with somebody. That may have been something that was cool in the 80s. We've all drank that swill for so long now. We know which one we like. Like you can tell without even tasting the other one what it is.
Yeah, for sure, dude, for sure. Because wine's the same way.
I think there's a couple. Yeah. Wine is the same way. Wine's the exact same way. I think with Scotch though, I think there's I have an issue with how hung up we get on the age though. And I get it. I'm not trying to say that we shouldn't. And I'm certainly not trying to say someone should charge you if they're selling you a 6-year at an 18-year price. Oh, hell yeah. There's an issue there, because there's definitely a difference. But if things aren't aged a year or two later, if the people that are putting them out are saying, well, it tastes just like it, I'm not going to get as much of an uproar as somebody else would. I will not have anything from that maker anymore. I can tell you that. Mm-hmm. Like I'll skip them based on business principles alone. Sure. Does it surprise me that people are labeling stuff and they're not as old as they could? No, we've been lying to each other since the day we've been able to write on a piece of paper. I don't doubt that at all. That's not news to me. I mean, you want me to show you the lies that the BBC has printed? I mean, we can all do that. But, do you enjoy the brand? Do you enjoy the flavor? That's one thing you have to ask yourself. So can you tell that big of a difference? I feel like I'm kind of beating around the bush with this. Let me just put it this way. For me, and this is why I'm not probably one of the experts to ask on it, but this is my the way I view it. If it was Macallan, I'd be pissed. But if it was Macallan, I would know. I'd know. I mean, just like I said, a few years ago, they dipped in what their flavor was. I mean, they just did. I could tell it just wasn't as smooth as it used to be. There's that group that was coming out at the time. It was the 12-year, I believe, 12 or 8, that was coming through at the time. That I was like, this just isn't as good as it normally is. And I scooted up a bit and bought a little bit more aged. I could tell a difference. But if you're suddenly going to give me a 12-year Glenlivet, I don't drink Glenlivet enough to know that Glenlivet's not a good 12-year Glenlivet. So I'm going to drink that Glenlivet because I know what Glenlivet tastes like, and I know what I expect from it, and that's what I'm going to get. So it doesn't upset me as much, nor am I a collector, which would be a whole nother thing. Mm-hmm. I mean, the business side of this, yes, somebody should cream their butts for this. But as far as the consumer is concerned, no, if it ain't Macallan, you ain't going to upset me that much. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And I do think that a lot of this comes from a collector perspective. You're paying $10,000 for a bottle of rare whiskey, and then you find out it was made 8 years ago instead of 55 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, you've been duped. That's something to be pissed off about. Yes, absolutely.
For sure. But it's interesting what you said about the BBC, because while I was reading the article, they talked about carbon dating the whiskey, and I just was sitting there going, how accurate is that really? Because whenever they carbon date stuff, it's right. Always like, yeah, we carbon dated this back between 100,000 and 150,000 years ago. And so I've just got this mental image of them carbon dating this whiskey and going, holy crap, it's 1,000 years old. No, wait, it's 8 years old. It's somewhere in there. It's in that range.
Look, the only time I've been able to trust when carbon has been involved in anything is when they froze Han Solo, and I knew how long he was frozen because I saw it happen. So that like we get into that all the time. We'll see that a lot. So we see that a lot here down in the South, where we have there's tons of historical facilities down here, and people are constantly finding things from old like Civil War sites or Revolutionary War sites. There's tons of bullets and guns you find down here all the time because we fought a lot of wars back here a couple hundred years ago, and they'll come back with carbon dating on stuff. And we know that this came out of this and blah blah blah, and it'll be in a museum, and somebody will walk by one day and just go like, "Well, that's not the markings they used. That was Civil War, not Revolutionary War." And it's like, well, crap, we were wrong on that. And again, if you're in the science field and you're someone who sits around carbon dating stuff, I don't mean to crap on what you do. But my point is, like, yes, you're right. We can be wrong on this. Am I a guy that likes government regulations? No. But I bet you if you slap these people on the hand hard enough, I bet you they're going to watch how they do it from now on, at least for a little while. And so I don't know that we can really rely on something like dating it. We can try. I mean, that's fine. But I would ask how they found that out, and if it was from, somebody coming by and checking on it and tasting it and looking into what they're doing, and not, just like some whistleblower case. I would just do that more frequently to make sure, But listen, the market, let the names out of who did it. The market will correct it. People will not buy from them. I mean, their sales will tank for a while. They'll learn a lesson from this in one way or another. I don't know that carbon dating is going to really be able to. The accuracy of that? No, I agree with you on that.
Yeah, it's a little bit, and again, I'm not a scientist, but, it does feel a little bit dubious to me, but I could definitely see this report affecting the secondary selling of these bottles because, it really calls it into question and it makes you wonder. And so if you were a collector, I don't know. I would be very careful. I would be very careful because when you're talking about this kind of money for these kind of bottles, this seems like it would be a good place to put your money as long as you could control it. And as long as something like, this article didn't happen, it feels like that'd be a really good place to put your money because I don't know how much these bottles would appreciate every year. But if they were found to be real, quote unquote, and you sat on it for 5 years after paying $10,000 for it, what's it going to be worth in 5 years? 15,000? I mean, No,
that's an excellent point, and it's one of those things when you look at it from the business perspective of it. I mean, think about that. Think about going back to my friend Larry, who is down there in his wine cellar, and if he had told us, "Hey, I bought this wine. I'm never going to drink it. It is a collector's item. It is an investment. It is something that I want to have." But he was telling us also about how they trade it up. And they'll try different things, and people will want to come and they'll want to buy certain things. And so there is a fun collectors and business, opportunity for this stuff to appreciate. If Larry were to then find out that, Louis V did not actually have this bottle at his daughter's wedding, then suddenly that bottle is now worth nothing. And you've been absolutely duped on it. And now it's a great $25 story of, hey, Larry, who was in the Dallas Morning News, getting duped on that case of wine. Sure, I'll buy one of those bottles because that tells me a good story. I mean, there's always a value to it somehow. But if it's not what you were, originally went into it for, that's a horrible thing to have to deal with. And that's something that I feel bad for, whether you're collecting wine or you're collecting cars. That's something you don't want to see happen anywhere.
Yeah, it's very true. Cars, by the way, are the other good place to be putting your money right now because the right collector car will only appreciate. So
sure.
It's interesting that you brought that up. And speaking of Scotch whiskeys, I went to a Scotch whiskey tasting at a friend of mine's house here a while back. Steve, I'm looking at you. It was a great time. I'm really glad I did it, but man, I had the worst hangover the next day. And, I'm not a Scotch drinker, but I've been drunker than that lots of times and never had that bad of a hangover. And I'm wondering if it's something in the Scotch that does that to me. Gin will do the same thing to me. I can't drink. If I have 2 gin drinks, I'll wake up with a headache the next day. There's just something weird about the chemicals or something, the makeup of the alcohol, whatever's in it. You know what I'm talking about? Do you have anything that affects you in that way?
Yeah, it's funny that you bring up gin. I don't know if there's something in gin or the fact that whenever I start drinking it, I won't stop. And gin's got a magical power just to make me absolutely guzzle that stuff down, especially down here when it's 95 degrees and our humidity's through the roof. Down in this part of the country, gin seems to go down real fast. So I don't know if it's that. For me, I'll tell you, there are two things that get me, and it's funny because we started off talking about wine, but I will get, if I'm drinking a cab, if I drink way too much cab, I will get what I just refer to as my wine hangover the next day. It is a more dull thing, so it must be something. I don't get it if I drink other wines. It's something in cab that does that to me. But what's odd is it's also draft beer. Now, I'm not suggesting that the same thing that's in draft beer is in cab. And it can almost be any draft beer. So it's something in that process that if I get too much of whatever that thing is in my body does not like it. I can sit down and drink 12 beers out of a bottle or a can and 8 beers that are draft another night, and I will have a hangover that is 3 times worse over the fewer draft beers than the other ones. So I have heard that before. There are certain things in certain alcohols. Your body kind of does this with food as well. There's certain things that we don't relate it the same way. It doesn't feel the same. We're not dealing with the headaches and stuff the same. But we probably don't overconsume food the way we don't realize we do with alcohol. But I have a hard time. I have a hard time with those two things. They get me pretty bad.
And it's so weird because every single person's body is different. And that's why there's so many different diet books out there and stuff. It's if we all had the same metabolism, if we all had the same systems in our bodies, there would be one diet book and it would work for everybody, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. It's like my wife has done the keto diet before, and it worked really well for her. I did it, and cutting back carbs of any kind probably isn't bad for you, and cutting back sugars. But I've one time done basically a non-processed diet, which is where you just shop. They basically say shop on the outside of the grocery store. Don't overdo it, but eat what you want to eat, but try to cut out all the sugars you have and stuff like that. That worked really well for me. My wife has tried doing it. It didn't work well for her. It's funny how that stuff just kind of goes back and forth, depends. It's the same thing with flavors and the same thing how our bodies work. I mean, just because we all like to drink and because we do drink and eat to sustain our life, there are people out there with peanut allergies, which is the strangest thing in the world to me. I cannot figure out. Every kid I knew, none of us had peanut allergies. Now peanuts are murdering people left and right. I don't understand, and I'm sure there's someone that understands the science behind that can explain that to me. We all do develop allergies. I mean, I eat some of the same things that probably some of those people did as well. My body did not react to it that way. So it's funny. Why should we think any differently when it comes to not just our taste, but what our body tells us? Look, there are some things like absinthe. Mm-hmm. Like absinthe. And my body does not like it when I drink absinthe. My mind does not like it when I swear to God, I had a conversation with Jim Morrison the last time I drank absinthe.
Dude, I don't think anybody agrees with absinthe.
Yeah, but here's the thing: is I like it though. Like I like the taste of absinthe. I like the way the cough syrupy feel. I like the romanticism of having the absinthe spoon and watching the sugar cube drip the fire into I really like that whole thing, and I completely enjoy it until my body starts to try to process it. And so what in the world have you done to us, Chad? So that does happen. But yeah, that's it. Doesn't surprise me. We all have stuff like that we have to get past.
Dude, that's why I stick with bourbon. That is just my safe go-to. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Me too. Like I've said before, gin, scotch, vodka. I'm a big vodka drinker. I know what it's going to do to me. I know how it's going to make me feel. I know, I can control it. I know when I need to stop on it because I'm asking for trouble. It's easier to control that. I get into some other things and God knows where we're going,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, it's like that absinthe, man. You get a few drinks in and suddenly you want to kiss the sky and touch the rainbow, right?
That's right. I'm the lizard man. I'm telling you, it's amazing.
We had a really interesting thing get released here in Oregon recently. Friend of ours, friend of the show, Chris Beatty over at Spiritopia, he finally got to release his ryegrass whiskey. It's not a rye whiskey. It's a ryegrass whiskey. The ryegrass, there's a very specific point where you can cut it. It's when the stalk has gotten tall and it's starting to produce seeds, but it hasn't started to produce the seeds yet, the rye seed, the stalks are like 70 to 80% carbohydrate at that point. And he found a process for brewing that and then distilling that and making a whiskey out of it. And it is shocking. It's an absolutely incredible. I'm going to have to find a way to get a bottle out to you one of these days. I think you'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic.
It really was surprisingly good. I shouldn't say surprising because everything that Chris makes is really good, but this was shockingly good. And it represents a 5-year struggle that he's had with the FDA trying to get it approved because no one's ever made a ryegrass whiskey before.
Right. Well, we had that issue in a lot of different ways, I've got a buddy of mine. I think he and I did a show a few months back. His name is Ross McNeil, and he's out there. They're out there in your neck of the woods. They have a vodka company called Glass Vodka, and they Ross is in that with his brother. His brother's the guy that started it. His brother was down here at the University of South Carolina for school, and he moved out that way. And they ferment it with wine grapes. It's apparently a really amazing thing. They have a hard time, obviously, branching out into different states just due to the regulations that are there. But because of their process to get started in the first place, he ran into that. And it's like, I'm not doing anything that's like crazy. Like, I'm not using moon rocks or anything that you don't already see here. I'm just using different ingredients. I'm just using a different thing. It's not like I'm using like a poppy plant and getting opioids in here. I mean, this is just what we're doing. And it was amazing when you hear the story about how it was a struggle to get that stuff up and running because the process is different. And so, yeah, I bet your buddy had issues with that. I can only imagine if you're completely doing something differently, everybody's going to raise an eyebrow. They want to get into it. But here's the part of me that gets conspiratorial as well. Some of them kind of wish that they were involved in it, and so they may be trying to stall you a little bit before they can kind of get their buddies and their competition up and running. But that's as tinfoil hat as I go on that stuff.
You know what, man? I actually 100% agree with you because it's like when I applied for my license to make distilled romaine lettuce, the CDC was all over me.
Really?
No.
I was going to say, you did distilled romaine lettuce, you ass.
Hey, do you remember the recall from the CDC about that romaine?
Well, yeah, I do.
Yeah, man. That'd be some E. coli tainted vodka.
There you go. That's exactly. We need more of that crap out there. There you go.
That's right. That's right. Well, Chad, it has been incredible talking to you, my friend. I really appreciate you doing it and coming on, and always good to talk to you.
Yeah, man. Hey, listen, I appreciate it too. And not only you being on the show with me, but allowing me to come over here and chat with you. I dig your show. I love what you do. By the way, I do want to ask you one quick thing before we leave. Mm-hmm. Where are you from originally? Tell me again.
Oh, born and raised in Oregon. Lived all up and down I-5.
Okay.
But I am going to make my way over to Glass Vodka. They're in Seattle. We'll have a link to it below the show. Man, this show is going to have a ton of show notes. You know that?
I couldn't remember if Glass was in Oregon or Washington, but I got you. When you say barbecue on your show, so there's a difference over here on the East Coast between North and South, and kind of like the southeastern United States from Virginia on down to Texas. If you just go like a big old bow like that, when we say barbecue, it's different than what folks in the northern states call barbecue. Mm-hmm. So when you say barbecue, what exactly what specifically are you talking about? I'm just curious.
I'm talking about Salisbury steaks roasted in the oven.
Okay. Yeah.
No, you know what? Oregon barbecue is kind of a style all its own. We draw heavily from Southern styles. The competition barbecue here, surprisingly, is not very spicy, although every barbecue joint I've been to where I'm just eating as a regular patron, there's always some spice. There's always some heat. And so I find it very interesting that people are not putting the heat, the spice into Oregon barbecue for competition. But when it comes to me, I like it sweet, I like it sticky, and I like it spicy. I like a lot of depth of flavor.
So you are more like us then. So that makes sense to me, because I've seen it on your Facebook pages and I've listened to your shows. The difference is over here, just to explain. And I wasn't trying to like get you or anything on this.
No,
but
please.
When we're down here, when we say barbecue, we're talking specifically about like pulled pork barbecue, like sometimes even barbecue chicken. Like we're talking when we say barbecue, we mean something very specific. Up north, they basically mean grilling. Like when they say they're going to barbecue, you go up to their house and they've got hamburgers on the grill. It's like, what are you doing? This isn't barbecue. This is not barbecuing. And so it just seems like that's just like, if there are hot dogs and hamburgers on a grill, they call that barbecuing.
Right.
That's not what barbecuing is down here. So I was just curious if it was more the same. It sounds like you're from Texas to Kansas City. It looks like that area goes all the way up right up there to Oregon. Like it's pretty much all the same kind of thing, right?
I think so. We do a little differences. I think Oregon likes their thick, sticky tomato sauces rather than the thinned down vinegar base. Although I do see some mustard based sauces that pop up once in a while, but not quite as often. I think so. Oregon,
that's the difference in the Carolinas. Western North Carolina, if I've got this right, Western North Carolina is vinegar based. Eastern North Carolina barbecue is ketchup based. South Carolina barbecue is mustard based. And so we get kind of like all three of that around this area, but you pretty much can tell what is what by which sauce they use. So I was just curious. When you're I meant to ask you that earlier in the show. I actually meant to ask you that before the show started. I wanted to throw that out there before I lost you here.
Break that down for me one more time. Eastern.
I may have the North Carolina backwards, but I think it's Eastern is vinegar based. Western North Carolina is ketchup based. South Carolina is primarily mustard based.
Jeez, when are you guys going to have another civil war?
Well, if we might just need to decide which one's got the best sauce, and we can just handle that over here. It's fine. But no, listen, I appreciate you letting me come on the show and chat with you. I do dig your stuff. I love your passion for what you do. As a matter of fact, the newest version of the local bar just came out this morning. There's a guy that I talked to that's over in San Diego, California. The two of you have a very similar personality, and I love it. You're very passionate about what you do. You're very inclusive and wanting to bring people into that, and I so dig that, Andy, and I really like that. I think you've got like great stuff. And you're such an interesting guy, and your knowledge base is fantastic. But, man, it's just great being around folks that have a wonderful passion for what they do. And I appreciate you letting me come on and just bloviate for a bit about stuff I hardly know anything about. But it sure is a whole hell of a lot of fun to spend some time with you, man.
Well, I appreciate that. And I appreciate you, my friend. The Local Bar is your show. Localbarmedia.com is where you can find everything that Chad is doing. And, of course, you go through Libsyn, but you can find his shows, Local Bar, as well as Welding a Family. You can find those anywhere you find any of your other podcasts. Chad, thank you again, my friend. I really appreciate it.
All right, man. Listen, we'll look forward to talking with you soon, buddy.
Great. Talk to you again.
All right. Take care.
And there he goes. Love that guy. Love the work he's doing. Love his show. Go out and help him out by throwing a like and a comment his way. While you're doing that, make sure that you're swinging by boostboostbbq.com. You're going to find all of the show notes underneath of this episode, some photos. We'd love to hear your thoughts about barbecue, about life, about the show. Leave us a comment, leave us a review. We always, always love and appreciate seeing those from you guys. So, thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks so much for telling a friend. For Chad, this is Andy, and we will see you next time. Boost, Booze, and Barbecue.